Welcome to Educate Essentials. I'm your host, Dr. Nakia. Thank you for joining me for another episode. I'm sending you guys good vibe, and thank you for listening today. Educate Essentials is an educational podcast that provides essential information and tips about education, leadership, all about diverse learners. You know I love my diverse learners. The mission of Educate Essentials is to bring positive awareness and promote equity and inclusion by sharing information and topics about our diverse, non-traditional learners. Educate Essentials goal is to restore faith in education one student at a time by empowering listeners with knowledge, because we all know knowledge is power, so let's be powerful. And we are going to start off with our Educate Inspiration today. And today we are celebrating. I was actually delighted and excited. I attended my first conference for exceptional children, which is a nationwide conference in Louisville, Kentucky. And one thing that I enjoyed that was really a treat was the Yes I Can Awards. The Yes I Can Awards celebrate the achievements of children and youth with exceptionalities by encouraging these individuals to seek their highest potential and increasing public awareness of the abilities, aspirations, and personal qualities of those with disabilities. So our 2023 Yes I Can Award winners are, drumroll please, for art, Jaquan Price and Sabrina Hernandez; for academics, Dwayne O'Neill and Lorelei Barrios Castillo; for community and school activities, Matthias Meisner and Shelby Ferris. Also, there's more. For self-advocacy, we have Cora Smith and Mason McLean; for technology, Foster Sports and Joshua Daniel Agmanlian Salvation; and for transition, Eduardo LeBron. Congratulations, all of you winners of the Yes I Can Awards. I just love this. And like I said, this was just a real highlight of the conference, and just seeing these individuals be awarded for their awesome achievements. And if you want more information, I will share the link on the YouTube page, and you guys can go and see the award winners and see the little information in bio about them, because it provides some a background about the winners. So congratulations to everyone. Yes I Can Award winners, and I look forward to seeing who's going to be 2024 Yes I Can Award winners with the Council for Exceptional Children. And thank you, Council for Exceptional Children, for honoring those students. So this is March, and this is the season. I also want to continue to celebrate accomplishments of inclusion. So here are just some dates to remember. March is Women's History Month, so we want to recognize and celebrate our women and the accomplishments that women have done to our country and in our lives every day. Also, March is Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month. It's the 1st through the 31st. March 14th through the 20th is National Down Syndrome Week. March 21st is World Down Syndrome Day. March 22nd through the 28th is National Autism Awareness Week. So let's celebrate our exceptionalities and inclusion with a little inspiration. Now it's time for our Essential News. The U.S. Department of Education is introducing an IDEA discipline and behavior requirements blog series. Valerie C. Williams, Director of the Office of Special Education, introduces blog series. It will be coming this summer, 2023, and it will explain topics of interest related to discipline and behavior guidance. The series would expound on alternatives to exclusionary discipline, informal removals, discipline disparities in behavior as a part of free and appropriate public education. The series will also feature resources for stakeholders and encourage a shift to address challenging behaviors proactively, positively, and preventative. I will drop that link also in the YouTube page for you to go and check out on the Educate Essentials YouTube page. If you want to check out that blog series and follow. I do feel like this is something that's very much needed right now in today's school. The data trends do show that children with disabilities are disciplined at greater rates than their peers. And I feel like what Dr. Williams is trying to do with supporting and keeping our children in schools and ensuring that those behaviors are addressed proactively, positively, and preventively, where students can stay in school and access their faith and be a part of the general education environment and curriculum. So please check out that blog series, leaders, administrators, educators, and parents. And hopefully this will be a positive shift and help dissipate some of the discipline that's been increasing in schools since post-pandemic. Also in essential news, there's a Supreme Court update. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with this case. It from the U.S. Supreme Court with a case that has been trending related to special education. The case is Sturgis versus Perez. And in a rare unanimous decision, the U.S. Supreme Court decided that individuals will enter into a settlement resolving their Individuals with Disability Education Act claims and also pursue monetary damages against school districts under the Americans with Disabilities Act without exhausting the administrative processes under IDEA. This decision reverses one from the Sixth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. In this case, is a really interesting case, and it's a case about a student who's deaf or hard of hearing, and he did not, based on what happened, the school district failed to provide him a free and appropriate public education. They resolved the case. I'm not sure if they were awarded monetary damages or whatever resolution the district did to resolve that against the IDEA. And they thought they were done, and now the family is going back and they're suing the school district again. But this time they're going after money and funds under the Americans with Disabilities Act, under the Office of Civil Rights. And before, I'm guessing the rules said that if you were awarded damages under IDEA, you cannot go back and sue under the Office of Civil Rights and the Americans with Disabilities Act. But now the Supreme Court is saying, hold on, yes, you can. We're not going to stop it. So now the school district and the student will be going back to court, and we will see what the Supreme Court rules as far as if that family is awarded damages under the Americans with Disabilities Act, along with the Office of Civil Rights. This is definitely a game changer for special education law and legality in cases with school districts and how school districts are going to honor themselves after this case. And I think this case actually goes to court this summer. I'm not sure, but just check it out, be aware, and we'll see what happens with Sturgis versus Perez in the whole case. And I hope that whatever happens, that the family is able to move forward and that district is able to move forward. And that's going to be it for Essential News. Now we look into our essential knowledge for today. And as I mentioned, I was able to present for the first time at the National Conference for Exceptional Children. And I presented my book, Essential Tips for Special Education Leaders, things that I discussed during that presentation. One was to provide leadership strategies about special education programs and support leaders or educators in their current role. I want to provide a deeper understanding of special education foundations, including laws, the individual education plan, local education agencies, and diverse learner agencies. And the third thing I highlighted in the presentation was key recommendations and knowledge to enhance leadership in special education, and just some resources and where to find those resources so you can effectively lead in special education. I had a wonderful turnout, and I'm just very blessed and excited to have been able to share my book and share my knowledge and my resources to a wonderful group of educators, parents, and leaders nationwide at the conference in Louisville, Kentucky. And if you want to check out the pictures, I have pictures on the Educate Essentials Facebook page, so go check them out and follow me anyways. But in Essential Tips for Special Education Leaders, this is my first book, and I wrote this book based on my journey when I became a school-level administrator when I relocated to Georgia. And previously, I was an administrator in Florida, and I thought I knew everything until I moved to Georgia. And once I moved to Georgia, I became a school-level special education administrator leader. It was game-changing, to say the least. And I went through the whole excited about the job shock. I went through the whole excitement, and then the self-doubt, and then the fear, and then the regret, and just the whole stages of the job cycle. And those are some things that I highlight in chapter 1, the excitement, and then I started becoming overwhelmed. Then the self-doubt came in, and then I had to adjust my mindset. I had to practice some self-care. Then I had to create some goal, task-oriented outcomes. And so the first chapter is called What in the World? Because once I got into the job, I said, what in the world happened? What did I get myself into? But over time, I was able to leverage ways for positions to sustainability. And that's what I talked about at the conference. I just want to point out or highlight in chapter one, after I went through all of that and the role and started accepting my job and finding ways to be successful in the role, I want to point out that in leadership, your words, actions, thoughts, and feelings matter and influence others. We construct our own social reality in ways that reflect and reinforce our minds. So at first, I was excited, and then I was overwhelmed, and then I began to self doubt and make mistakes. And then I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. But I had teachers depending on me. I had my own children at home depending on me. And I had to figure out ways to construct my and shift my mindset to be positive, regardless of how I was feeling, exuberate confidence, have that positive mindset, self awareness, optimistic confidence, because I was leading others. And so in chapter one, I talk about that and how you sustain yourself when you're in a new position and trying to learn and establish and get your footing grounded in a new role, and especially in special education leadership. And even in this role at the time, a lot of the resources I had to go on the internet and find things, which is what drove me to write the book. Once I graduated with my doctorate, I wanted to provide something to give back to the community. So I wrote Essential Tips for Special Education Leaders to give back to the community, give back to leaders, educators, anyone who is new to special education. You have some type of tangible resource just to go and look and find some essential knowledge about how to be successful when you're in leadership in special education and the programs related to diverse learners. So one thing I do want to point out when you're looking in that role and you're in that role and you're trying to have that position state sustainability, you want to make sure that you establish support teams and don't be afraid to ask for help. You want to collaborate with others and others with that previous knowledge so you can learn from them. And then you want to learn from your experiences. You want to be responsive to people and with that, you have to accept and adjust your role. You have to evaluate and prioritize your deadlines and dates and what's due this week, next week, and what's due a year from now. And then from there, you have to create some fundamental task oriented short term goals. So, this is my goal for this week. This is my goal for today. This is my goal for next week. And then you prepare for the day every day. You want to make sure that you prioritize your responsiveness. And I know that it can be overwhelming, but you want to make sure that you're prioritizing and responding to all parties and stakeholders, and you're prioritizing that as well. We always want to make sure that our students are first, but then we have to also prioritize all the multiple duties that you juggle when you're in a leadership role because there's so much to do. Make sure that you're asking questions, and making sure that you learn from your mistakes. And I would say one thing that I learned that really helped me was just having like a checklist, morning, afternoon, and evening checklist. And even if I didn't check off anything, if I checked off one thing, that was a win. Chapter two, I talk about history and how history helps us understand and contributes to society. And I talk about the way that students with disabilities were treated back in the beginning of times in America and how over time that exclusion became more inclusion. And it was Brown versus the Board of Education that changed that whole landscape for equal education opportunities. And I talk about how PL 94 142 came about and all the other amendment acts, the development of the IEP, and all those things, and how that shifted into what we have now with special education services and IDEA law and requirements for today. And so chapter two just provides that historical overview of how exclusion became inclusion and how children are now included in the lessons and included in schools. And with chapter two, the one thing I want you to come away with as a leader or educator or parent is how will you advocate for inclusive culture for your students and the teachers you need based on what you learned from that history. So I just want to leave that with chapters one and two. Chapter three, I talk about relationships. Oh my gosh, this is my favorite thing as a leader is relationships. I feel like relationships are so important. And effective school administrators know how to build positive relationships that increase the social capital of their schools. The influence of relationships in leadership is powerful. When I got into any leadership role, had I not had solid relationships, ask questions, and prioritize, I would have failed because I needed that team of teachers. I needed my team of administrators. I needed my team of parents to help teach me and help me become a better leader. So relationships are so important when you're in leadership, when you're in education, when you are an educator, leader, district leader, wherever you go, relationships are monumental. And when you're looking at those leadership relationships and relationships all around, I just wanted to highlight that you have your district administrative leadership that you communicate and collaborate with your district people. Then you also have your administrative team. You're surrounding yourself with those like-minded administrators. You're also surrounding yourself with your like-minded special education district administrators who are helping you along the way. Your general education teachers, you have to have a relationship with them because you want them to be involved and include those students to ensure that those students have access to free and appropriate public education. And then you want to make sure that you're definitely supporting special education teachers who are teaching the kids and writing the IEPs and making sure that documents are online and in compliance. And then your school staff, your clinic, your cafeteria, you want to treat everyone fair and equally. That's one thing I love about Abbott Elementary is that the custodian is there. Everyone is there. They have the cafeteria workers there, the principals there. You know, everyone is one team working together for the betterment of those students. You want to make sure that you have that school staff relationship, your relationship with your parents, which is very important, and making sure that you're responsive to parents, that you're listening, you're asking questions, you're being authentic, you're getting to know their kids, and you're building that connection that you're remaining student centered. And then, of course, the most important relationship that you're going to have as a leader is your students. See, nothing motivates a child more than when a school values learning, family, and community working in partnership. Your students are your heart of your school. Your students, your teachers, and your parents are the heart of the school. So you want to make sure that you are building those solid relationships with those students that is lasting because according to Marzano, the relationship with students that you build and the culture you establish in your building has been directly linked to student achievement. And Whitaker stated that the principal's practical focus is on people, not programs. Focus on behaviors then beliefs, and then insist on loyalty to students to maximize their ability of high achieving teachers and establish expectations at the beginning of the school year. That is the primary focus of principals and leaders. I just want to leave you with that quote. I felt that that was very important as it builds those relationships. And relationship, that whole chapter is like my biggest chapter in the book because I go in detail about the value of all those relationships because they are so important. So chapter 4, I just talk about essential knowledge. You know, I always say knowledge is power, and as leaders, you must be conscious and seize daily opportunities to better yourself professionally and acquire special education knowledge. Effective administrators need to develop a work knowledge about disabilities and the unique learning and behavior challenges that present in their building. So, as an effective administrator, you need to know what exceptionalities you have in your building as far as students, how your students with disabilities are performing, what are their learning challenges, and how, as you as a leader, going to target and promote success with those learning challenges. You have to be conscious and seize those opportunities to lead and support all students and gain knowledge where you're going to lead and support all students. Now, before I go into a little bit more with knowledge, and I want to highlight that leaders must be conscious and seize daily opportunities for themselves. Essential knowledge in chapter 4, I break down the parts of the individual education plan because if you're a leader in special education, you need to understand what the IEP is for students with disabilities. Related services, I discussed that. Audiology, transportation, assistive technology, occupational therapy, and physical therapy. Also talk about the generation, like I said, in chapter 2 of Public Law 94, 142. But then I also talk about that even more in chapter 4. A lot of this I've already talked about on other podcasts when I went over the overview of special education. But in chapter 4, knowledge is power, I explain all those things and how it's important for school leaders in special education to know these programs and be versed in these programs so they can support their teachers in gen and special education. Also in chapter 4, I talk about the various eligibility categories, placement options. What is a manifestation determination meeting? That is important when it comes to discipline. Section 504 plans, the multi-tiered system of support, and response to intervention. I talk about all of those programs in chapter 4 because knowledge is power. And when you're leading in special education, you may be privy or have some type of connection with those other programs. Chapter 5 through 7, I highlight what a local education agency is. When I first came into my role, one thing in chapter 4 and in this chapter was a lot of acronyms, and they would talk about the LEA, 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 and I was like, what in the world is an LEA? What in the world is a BIP, BIP? All these acronyms. So in chapter 4, I also highlight all of the acronyms that are related to special education, and I give you a definition because when I would sit in those meetings, I would sit and listen, and they would say all these acronyms, and I had no idea what they meant. So I would write them down, and I would go to the Department of Education site after the meeting and go research what that meant. So you don't have to do that with this book because in chapter 4, I highlight all the acronyms and explain what they are with the definition. And that's the resource that you need because I needed that when I was in that position. So moving on, chapter 5 through 7, I talk about the local education agency, the LEA, as we say, and that's just the district. And the district is going to enforce and follow federal laws, state policies, and standards. The leadership and special education leadership, you become the representative on behalf of the district, which is the local education agency. And that's why they call you the LEA because you make that final call of fate based on a state of free and appropriate public education based on the IEP team meeting. And in that role, you might have to have difficult and facilitate difficult IEP meetings and leadership. So just some few tips that I presented in the presentation and in the book. You should, you should have a preparatory activity where you highlight some of the concerns and how the team is going to address those concerns if those concerns arise. You want to make sure that you have an agenda and that you have seating arrangements for everyone. Have planned breaks, have copies of the child's IEP, and any other pertinent information. Make sure that you inform your principal. Make sure you have roles assigned who's going to be the note taker, what time we're going to start, what time we're going to end. And then when things get too litigious or too hot or like unproductive, then you take a break. So in that, I just provide some ways to facilitate difficult meetings. There are many more that I have in there. But I just want to point out that that's discussed under the local education agency because that will be your role as an LEA to facilitate some of those difficult meetings. Chapter 6 and 7, I talk about resiliency and confidence. And strong leaders understand the importance of resiliency in school leadership because you're resilient in those facilitating those difficult meetings. Bandura explained when faced with obstacles, setbacks, and failures, those who doubt their capabilities, slacken their efforts, give up, or settle for mediocre solutions. As leaders, we're not going to be mediocre. So chapters 5, 6, and 7, I talk about local education agency, facilitating those difficult meetings, being resilient during those difficult meetings, and being resilient in leadership. And then when you're faced with setbacks, having the confidence to not settle for mediocre solutions, but move forward because you're confident in your leadership. Chapters 8 through 10. Chapter 8 is my second largest chapter. In that chapter, I talk about the value of team building. Relationships are important, but once you build those relationships, you have to have your team. So in chapter 8, I talk about having a vision, norms, communication, delegation, and other components to build a strong, solid team because you cannot lead in special education or any role of leadership without having a great team behind you. And then pivoted into that, chapter 9, I talk about leading with your heart because as you're leading people, you want to make sure you're valuing people, you're valuing parents, you're valuing your students, and you want to make sure that you are leading with the heart and making sure you cultivate a culture where all parties know that you appreciate and value their contributions, and you're leading with humanity, compassion, and empathy because all those things go along with, especially in leadership when you're leading students. You want to make sure you have that. And then chapter 10, I talk about ethical leadership. So ethical leaders, you're humble, you fulfill commitments, you're fair, you're concerned for the greater good, you show respect, and you're courageous for what is right for students, what is right for teachers, what is right for the greater good. And then you meet those timelines because special education leadership is very litigious. So you want to make sure you're ethically meeting timelines and remaining compliant. Even if you have to have your district support you and go through legal laws and manuals, make sure that you're abreast on what's changing and what's trending. So you're not on the news because you're in special education litigation. So my essential tips for special education leaders as I close out, your tips for today is I want you to focus on success and learn from your losses because there's always a lesson learned from every failure. And that comes from chapter 1. Set those attainable goals and check the boxes, chapter 1. Build relationships, all in chapter 3. Intentionally seek knowledge. Knowledge, like I said, is power, and you never stop learning. I am still learning today, and I've been in education 26 years. You never stop learning. Seek that knowledge. Stay fresh. Stay abreast. Be resilient and confident, which is addressed in chapter 6 and 7. Lead and build your team, chapter 8, the second largest chapter. And you want to lead with your heart. A lot of times when I'm leading and I'm talking to parents and I'm doing things in my day to day life, I want to make sure that I'm leading with empathy, compassion, and making sure that people feel valued. The value is very important because people are motivated by how you make them feel. Adjust your leadership to the times and circumstances. Remember, I said gain knowledge. When you gain knowledge, you got to also always evolve. Over time, the person I was when I first started special education leadership in Metro Atlanta, Georgia, is not the person that's here now. I've evolved, I've learned lessons, and it's helped me become a better leader, a better educator, a better person. So learn from your losses, learn from your mistakes, and then evolve with the times. The kids that we had in the classroom 5 years ago are different from the students that we have today. So you want to always make sure you stay current, you stay refreshed, you're learning, you're gaining knowledge, and you're always involved. And then I want to encourage you to purchase a copy of the Essential Tips for Special Education Leaders book on Amazon because everything I've talked about today is in the book. It's a great resource for leaders, whether you're a general education leader or a special education leader, educator in the classroom, a teacher who is looking to be in special education in college, or whatever you decide to do. It's just a great resource for anyone. And it provides just some foundational and tips and recommendations for about special education and those programs. So secure your copy on Amazon. So these are pictures I want to share. This is me at the Conference for Exceptional Children, and this was after I presented, and I was so excited. And I actually took a picture with the CEC Ohio members, Shannon, that whole Ohio. Shout out to you guys because you guys were so sweet and awesome. So the Council for Exceptional Children in Ohio, we took a picture together at the convention center in Kentucky. And I want to thank everyone who's a part of that national conference for exceptional children because everyone there, even behind the scenes, were all so sweet and so wonderful and just really great people. So thank you for a wonderful experience. Thank you, Shannon and the Ohio CEC for welcoming me and taking pictures with me. And thank you all who attended the session and signed up for the session and supported me. And thank you all who are on this podcast listening for today. As always, please make sure you grab copies of any of the books here. And if you need any essential advice, I have leadership background experience, I have educator background experience, I have parent background experience. So if you have a situation related to special education, intervention, English speakers of other languages, or any type of diverse learn or educational question, email me at edufaithforall@gmail.com. It's EDUFAITH, the number 4ALL @gmail.com. And I can read your letter and provide some advice to the best of my ability to help support you in whatever your endeavor is regarding education and diverse learning. I talked about leading with your heart, so I want to leave you with a quote from Maya Angelou that said, I learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And I'm taking that from chapter 9 because you have to have empathy and compassion and value people because people will remember how you make them feel. And you want to be a person that makes people feel good and you pour into them. Educate Educational Services. This podcast is brought to you by Educate Educational Services. If you need any of my services, just know that I love diverse learners and interventions. I have a plethora of services through Educate Educational Services, which include consulting for parents, educators or leaders, parents. If you're having a hard time understanding the IEP or something going on with your child with exceptionality or diverse learner or trying to seek those services, I can help you with that. College accommodations and advocacy and consulting. You have a student that's going to college, you're trying to figure out how to get those accommodations when they go to college. I can help you with that. Parent education trainings, if you want maybe a community event, virtual or in person, I've done parent trainings for school districts and communities, college and career coaching for those students who are trying to get into college, whether you have a disability or not, professional development and training for businesses and districts regarding diverse learners. And I now specialize with students with disabilities, interventions, English speakers of other languages, education, and leadership. Program development under IDEA Section 504 trainings, diverse learners, and then coaching for educators and leaders because sometimes you need a person just to listen and give you advice who are non-evaluative, who can tell you what you need and you're not afraid to have those transparent conversations. Let's talk about that coaching and instructional coaching because we all have to have someone we can depend on. And those are all the services for educational services. To my believers, be blessed. To my others, be kind, be well, and be the change. As always, I want to thank you all for listening to my Essential Tips for Special Education Leaders podcast and the Educate Essentials podcast. Please feel free to follow me at Educate Essentials on YouTube, and you can listen to this podcast on all platforms, which include Pandora, iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and other podcast platforms. And follow me. I have posts and information I like to share every day or mostly every day. I have posted information I like to share on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. So follow me so you can keep up with what's going on with EduFaith and information with diverse learners. As always, thank you. And you guys have a wonderful, wonderful day.